My name's TyrannoCyrusRex, and I'm going to help you beat the meta cars. Every week, there are various people who create race guides for the GT7 daily races. My personal favorite is Mr. MCA, who does a great job of explaining how he got his lap time, what to expect in the race, and the strategy. Most guides use the meta car, because obviously people want to win, and using the meta is the best way to do so. With my guides, I hope to give you a fighting chance to use an alternative car to achieve the same result. Despite the balance of performance, in any given car class and track combination, there always seems to be a car or a set of cars that are head and shoulders above the rest. We had the all-wheel drive meta in Group 4, which was 3 different all-wheel drive cars that were way better than everything else. And in Group 3, there were 2 cars that pretty much dominated all the time. I suspect that one of those cars is still OP. Group 4 Alpha 155 was extremely agile and had incredible acceleration. The GTR was the best choice anytime there were high speeds and long straights. The WRX was a great combination of both. Agile, quick, and it had a better top end than the Alpha. The 2013 GTR was dominant for a very long time in almost every single category. However, for tire wear and fuel races, Porsche was incredible. And now we have the new meta. The Audi TT leads the front-wheel drive meta just like in GT Sport. And the new Ford GT race car was already good, but it just received a buff. It's definitely the dominant car right now. Look at this leaderboard. 95 of the top 100 times are the Audi TT. You can immediately see something's different with the Group 3 Race C leaderboard, but still, out of 48 different car options, one car has 69 of the top 100 positions. That's the Ford GT. That's our meta car. Now, if you take a look, I set the 106th fastest time, and that's in the McLaren. And that is the fastest McLaren in the world at the moment. Now, if some of the faster guys decided, they could certainly put the McLaren much closer to the top. But that's because they're world class. So I chose the McLaren because I think it's easy to use. It is a lot less temperamental than the other MR cars, and I just love it. All right, time for the good stuff. So I'm going to go over my quali laps and how I got them with my anti-meta cars. And after each quali lap, I'm going to show you a race that I did without qualifying, because I think it's important to show how the anti-meta car can attack, defend, and of course do both at the same time. Now, don't be afraid to use the meta car to quali with, because you don't have to use that car for the race itself. You can still use your anti-meta car in the race. Another thing that's really important is I know not everyone uses the same view that I do, so I uploaded both of my qualifying laps, and I used the tags AMMC, Anti-Meta, and TyrannoCyrusRex. You should be able to find it pretty easily doing that. Feel free to reach out if you can't find it. Okay. Coming up to the first corner, we're going to look on the right side for this brown patch of grass right beyond the curb, and we're going to lift off and turn in right there. I used the brakes a little bit, probably should have used them a little bit more or just turned in more crisply, but I didn't. So I didn't use enough curb here, which gave me a narrow entrance to the next corner and a narrow entrance to the next corner. It's really easy to throw off the line through this entire sequence by messing up the first part. Now I touched grass here, went wide, went on the grass, and lost about a tenth from my last lap. So you can definitely go a lot faster than this, but it's still my best lap of the day. Brake hard before the tunnel, turn in, trail brake hard, and then what you want to do is after you let off the brakes, turn in a bit more, and then start aiming for this yellow sign on the left. You want to brake when you actually get to the sign, not before. I braked just a little bit too early, so I wasn't able to turn in early enough or as much as I want to, and so it delayed me getting on the throttle a little bit. It didn't cost too much time, but you can really maximize that by braking a little bit later. Make sure you say hi to the monkey for good luck. But then you want to focus on hugging this curb to the left, and at the end of the curb, that's when you turn in, downshift, hug this curb, and get on the throttle really gently so you don't push yourself wide. This next corner is the trickiest and probably the most important corner on the track. I like to make sure I'm in 4th gear and start turning in before getting on the brakes, and I'm only braking enough to make sure I've got enough grip in the front tires. You want to get on the throttle as early as you possibly can because it is the longest straight on the track. Another thing that I could have done to get an even better qualifying time was actually staying in 5th gear at the end of this straight. I shifted into 6th because I thought I was going to run out of 5th gear, but it turns out 5th gear is good enough all the way to the braking point. And speaking of braking point, it's this yellow sign that you're going to see right here. Now, when you get to the sign, you don't want to brake until you're already clear of it, right beyond it or right next to it. You're going to brake in a straight line until you see this right here, the end of that cement curb. When you turn in, you want to aim for this rock. It's almost like you want to put your nose under it, but not quite. And then get on the throttle gently, of course. It's not the end of the world if you don't get all the way to the left leading up to this next sequence. What's really important is beyond this right-hander, you're going to hug the curb on the left, and there's a crest that you're going to see right here. The road drops off very sharply here, so if you brake anytime after that tree, you're risking losing braking power. You want to immediately start trail braking and use up as much of this curb as you possibly can. If you use too much, you might slide out. But of course, get on the throttle extra gently because you're going downhill. The opposite is true here since the road flattens out sharply right there. So you're going to have more grip than you're expecting. Use as much of the curb as you can. You can use more than that, but you risk either giving yourself a penalty or making your tires slide on the curbs. Keep your eye on the left wall and you'll see a gap between signs. That's your braking point. The curbing on the right can upset the car if you brake onto it, but some people can do it consistently. I'd say just try it out. When I brake, I get all the way down to second gear, turn in, downshift to first, then back up to second just to rotate the car but not lose too much momentum. Make sure you avoid the yellow sausage curb on the inside. What you want to look for next is these tire marks right here. I try to go around those, and then these marks, I go straight through those. Now, I kept it in second when I got on the throttle. I should have upshifted to third. It's not too much of a difference in the time trial lap, but in a race, it can make a big difference when it comes to the top speed by the next corner. Alright, here's the lap at speed without any kind of slowdown. Again, look for this brown patch on the right. We're going to turn in, lift off, brush the brakes if we need to, and try to use more curb than I did there. Turn in later than I did there, and then we'll have a better exit. I went on the grass, lost a lot of momentum, but anyways, brake hard, trail brake immediately, get on the throttle when it feels right since you can't really see the exit, and then make your way down to this yellow sign. You want to brake after it. I braked too early there. Downshift to second, up to third before hitting the throttle, hug this on the left, downshift, hug this on the right, and then get yourself set up for the next corner. Again, turn in and lift off before touching the brakes to avoid understeer, and then try to get on the throttle in one smooth motion, unlike what I did. As you can tell, this lap is pretty rough. It was still a fairly decent qualifying time considering it wasn't the meta car, but still, it's been pretty rough. We could probably get 3 or 4 more tenths out of this pretty easily. So, coming out of the tunnel, you'll notice that you don't really need to shift to 6th. I did. You'll have better braking if you don't. Brake after the yellow sign, aim for the rock. You can probably apex earlier, get on the throttle earlier, and use more of the track. So again, that's more time that I lost and more that you can gain. Coming up here, we want to brake before the crest. Turning right here, we don't want to get on the throttle too heavy because it's going to make the tires wash out. And it's the opposite here. We're going to have way more grip than we expect as all that weight's going to be on the front. So we can really be aggressive with our braking there. Again, you're going to look at the gap between the signs on the left. Brake. I try to avoid the curb. You can try to use it sometimes. It's really up to you. But avoid this yellow sausage curb here. Keep up your momentum. And you want to upshift to third before that corner if you're in the race. It's pretty similar if you're just doing the quality lap or if you're not really planning on doing another lap after this. And that's our lap. So jumping right into the race, we're behind another Mustang, and you can already see it's creeping up on the TT, so already a good contender for the anti-map. Now, he's going to immediately get it wrong, and I think I'm going to have to go past him, but despite the super sketchy line, he somehow maintains speed. So again, I guess the Mustang's really that good. He tries to squeeze me here, but of course that just completely ruins his line. He goes wide, I stick to the inside, and now I'm chasing after the TT. So it doesn't take too long to get to the TT. He misses his apex here, so I figured that I should be able to take him in the next corner. I set up so I can potentially go on the outside then cut back, but it looks like he's going to give me space and then doesn't, so I've got to slam on the brakes. Right here I give him a little bump on purpose to just keep his momentum up, but I think I might have actually made him miss his braking point. Kind of felt bad, but since we were both still doing pretty well, I decided just to keep going with it. Now, he might have been upset, because as I go for the pass, he kind of starts squeezing me, but it doesn't look like there's anything egregious, so we move on. Now pay close attention to the Mustang. He's going to make a very, very late move. And I'm actually convinced he's going to miss it, so I just don't turn in initially. And he makes it just fine. That incredibly late move. Again, kudos to the Mustang. It really shows how good of a car the Mustang is. Now, I stay really close, and I didn't realize till later that I kind of scraped him against the wall. Felt bad about that. And he immediately kind of gets his revenge on me. Watanuki, the Mustang guy in front, kind of pays for it too. As I'm going for a dummy move right here, I was just going to try to sneak in. I got hit in the back by the Razor, pushed into Watanuki, and then things are just getting rough. So I'm figuring that I should just try to get out of this situation. We've been rough with each other. It's okay. None of us have had our race ruined. And then everyone's trying to make an attempt here. I cut in, leaving enough space, but the Razor just wanted to run into me. I'm not sure if he did it on purpose or if he's just making mistakes. It's been really rough, but none of us have really pushed each other too hard into a wall. Nothing's gone too crazy, so we just went with it. Felt a little bad about the instance, but I had subsequent races with them and didn't have any issues, so I think we're all okay. So it only took a couple corners to catch up to the next pack, and it actually happened at exactly the right moment. Just like I talked about in the lap guide, I'm going to shift up to 4th before getting on the throttle for the back straight. Shout out to the Mustang for giving me the space here. I use the slip from the 458, get around the Jag, and start getting to the point where I can almost pass the 458, but remember when I talked about not needing to shift up to 6th gear? This is exactly why. I'm about to get ahead of the 458, and instead when I shift, I lose all my momentum. 458 just keeps accelerating. Now, I was still feeling bad about the last lap. I realized that I had definitely squeezed the guy in this next corner, so I gave this guy extra space, and I gave this guy probably more space than he needed, which was perfect. He did bump me here, but really that just gave me a cool opportunity to drift. And I don't think he did it on purpose at all. Not 100% sure yet if it was intentional or not. I just defended on the inside and hoped, and yeah, it wasn't bad. Neither of them attacked egregiously. They bumped each other in the rear view, but they still gave each other space, so it was really cool to see that. I still wanted to defend dramatically and then cut on the inside to give him just enough space, and it ended up working out. I knew I could trust him, so I just left the inside open and tried to take the outside line, and I was really happy that he gave me that space there and he didn't push me into the wall. So shout out to Peyton as well. Now, I don't know what happened with these two guys, but we were able to get past them pretty easily, and it was essentially a non-issue. The unfortunate thing about Race B is it's always short. This is the second to last lap. It's only 3 of 4 laps, and Jab is only a couple seconds ahead, but he was a pretty good driver. I wasn't quite used to this car yet, so we're going to fast forward to the end, and you'll see that I almost got him. Jab Jr. seems like he was a pretty good driver, and that car is definitely good as well, so I think we would have had a pretty good battle if the race was a few laps longer. I do think the Ferrari is a really good alternate to the Mustang for an anti-meta car too, so perhaps on the next Group 4 race, we'll test that out. Alright, we're going to jump quickly over to the Group 3 quali lap. So we're going to look for the 300 board on the left. We're going to brake directly afterwards, once we pass it. Now, when we start to turn in, we're going to keep a lot of brake on as we're trail braking, and we're going to try to stay really tight to the corner. Once we've scrubbed off enough speed, we're going to turn in a little bit more after letting off the brakes and smoothly get on the throttle. It's really easy to understeer if you get on the throttle too quickly. You can go up on the curb, but make sure you don't hit that rail. We want to do our best impression of Takumi from Initial D by letting our tire dip directly into that gutter, but not touching the dirt. The dirt's going to slow you down here, but on the next left, it's going to give you a penalty. You want to do the same right here. Use that gutter if you can to get your car to rotate a little bit. And make sure you avoid this dirt at all costs. You will get an instant penalty. Right in between the 400 and 300 boards is where you're going to brake. I want you to pay special attention to the brake meter. You're going to see that I'm holding 100% brake even after turning in. The red part of the brake meter is how the game's adjusting based on the ABS. It's one of the keys to being fast in Gran Turismo. We're going to dip all the way down to first gear, but of course upshift to second before exiting. Hopefully you'll get enough rotation from that dip to first gear to get on the throttle really quickly. Using the 100 meter board to turn in, we're not going to start braking until after that. We're We're going to get to third pretty quickly, and then second pretty early just to get the car to rotate. Back up to third, back on the throttle, and then a quick lift, barely touching the inside gutter with the tires each time. We want to just slow down enough so we don't hit that wall on the outside. We're going to do the same thing here, downshifting to second early, and we're going to get back on the throttle, aiming for the middle of the track. Never use the shadow for a braking point, because dynamic lighting means it's going to change anytime track conditions are different. Once you're under the white arch, that's when we brake. Now we don't want to go to full brake because we're going to try to turn immediately, using first to rotate again, back up to second, and then get on the throttle gently so you don't get on the dirt on the exit. That'll slow you down a lot. Fun fact, this stone structure actually exists. Look for the 100-meter board on the right. We're going to brake right before we get to it, and we're going to aim for the cones in the distance. We want to start trail braking immediately, get down to second really quickly, and then make sure that we're going slow enough before we get to first gear. That's used to rotate and then back onto second gear so we can gently get on the throttle and hug the road to the left. Aim for the center of the left lane and start turning in right when you get to the rubberized marbles. I want you to notice that I started turning in before I started touching the brakes. Just barely use the brakes enough to get the car to turn in, and then get on the throttle as early as you can. I got on the throttle a little too quickly and a little too early, so I hesitated, so there's more time to be found there. You can use the curb all the way up to the concrete barrier, but make sure you don't hit that metal barrier that sticks out. As you approach the next hairpin, I want you to keep in mind that your braking point and your turn-in point are going to be separate. The 100-meter board is going to be your braking point, and after that I want you to look for this yellow sign that's on the side. Once you get to that yellow sign, that's when you're going to start turning in. You're already in second, so turn in, turn in, turn in, get to first to rotate, and then back up to second before touching the throttle. This curb is really touchy, and if you're gentle you can use it, but it's kind of risky. I've spun there a few times. Make sure you don't touch these cones at all because it's an instant penalty. What's really important is getting on the throttle as early as possible because this is the most important exit of the track. Now I didn't actually use all of the track, so I could have gotten some more speed here. The dirt kicks up a little bit onto the pavement and hides the actual edge of the pavement, so you can definitely use a lot more than that. The McLaren is also one of the very few MR cars that can take this curb on the right, so using that can get you rotated, so you don't have to steer as much and you can keep up a little bit more momentum. Make sure you don't shift until you get to 160 miles per hour. Let's look at that lap at full speed now. We're going to focus on the 300-meter board because we're going to brake directly after that. Quickly getting down to second gear, we're going to turn in, try to hug the corner as much as we can. When we get on the throttle, we've got to be gentle so we don't understeer. We're going to try to dip our tires in the gutter, but definitely avoid the dirt. It's most important on this left hand right here, but use all three of these gutters. That dirt will give you a penalty. We're going to brake between the 400 and 300, braking hard as we turn in, using first to rotate around, and then getting on the throttle as soon as we can. Using the 100-meter board to turn in, we're going to brake after that, staying in the middle of the road, down to third, down to second, and back up to third quickly just so we can keep our momentum through here. Dipping down to second and turning in really early, we're going to brake hard after the white arch, first to rotate back up to second before you're on the throttle and avoid that dirt at all costs. Looking for the 100-meter board, brake facing the cones, turn in, and get down to first to rotate, back up to second, use the middle of the lane, turn in before braking, and then get on the throttle as early as you can. Watch out for both the barriers, especially the sneaky metal one here. It's important to remember that the braking and turn-in points are very different here. Make sure you brake at the 100, turn in at the yellow sign, and be real careful on this curb. You can use all these curbs as long as you don't touch the cones. Those are an instant penalty. Get on the throttle as soon as you can, and I've found that a little bit of oversteer there, rather than being too gentle on the throttle, has yielded better results. Don't steer too much when you use this curb on the right, but you can use it with the McLaren. Get up to 160 miles per hour before shifting. I'm not sure what that is in kilometers per hour, but you've probably reached the end of your gear, so use as much of it as you can. Up next, we're going to go over a race that I actually won from the back in the McLaren. So, starting off, I first want to give a shout out to the dude in the BRZ. That is not an easy car to be fast in. I had a lot of fun with it, but still, it is really difficult to be competitive with. I should also make a note that it is 2 a.m. local time, so here's the overtake counter. I immediately recognized the top 3 guys as people that I had raced before, and I knew that they'd be a challenge. The Porsche ahead has that 2-second penalty from ramming a car, and then it also took a side contact, but it's still pulling away. It was about now that I noticed the McLaren was ahead, and then I noticed his line and realized, nope, he's not going to be able to help demonstrate how good it is. When I saw everyone bunched up, I was assuming everyone would die, but only one person went off. I was pretty surprised. The ghosting from that J guy probably helped. Now, since that happened, I had to choose one of the Porsches to follow. I chose the inside line, and luckily I was able to get past J guy. I did bump Salt, but it doesn't seem like we did any damage. Him, the 2 cars going side by side into a really slow corner was scary, but since he went off, it made it pretty easy to get by. Knowing the S's ahead were going to be a dangerous spot even with some people by themselves, I decided to hang back and not be too aggressive and go for an outside pass or anything, and that was probably the best move. They ended up pretty clean, and I thought it was safe until I saw Salt oversteer there. That was pretty scary, but he held it well. Now, Peppa Pig definitely also had a compromised exit, so it was pretty easy to pull up next to him and go for this move right here. Going for this inside pass here on a hairpin, I knew I was going to have a compromised exit, but luckily you're going to sacrifice most of these corners anyways. So I took a middle line to discourage any kind of passing attempts from him, and I took off. And luckily I had a better exit. So officially we've made it down to 4th place from 12th place in our first lap. And that puts us right behind the 3 guys who I knew I could have really good battles with. I was barely in Sturzy's slip, but I didn't know if it was quite enough to pull up next to him. Like I said before, I trust the 3 guys ahead, and I knew that I'd be able to have some really good battles with them if I could catch up. I figured it would take probably a lap or so, but then Sturzy made this mistake. I was pretty certain I was going to be able to get in his slip, but what really blew me away and really showed how much of a meta car the Ford GT is, he missed that apex by miles, no offense Sturzy, and he still maintained that gap. I hadn't even realized how good the McLaren was in dirty air. I actually can take that full throttle even following really closely. I didn't realize at that point. Remember that penalty? Bam. He touched the dirt just barely, instant penalty. I was a bit disappointed because I really wanted to be able to have a battle with him and make a pass based on the car itself or my techniques, but unfortunately, after that penalty, he got a little squirrely. And it was because of that, I got a little bit too aggressive. Take note of our lines here. He had a really narrow entry to that corner, slid out a little bit, and I still wasn't able to get up next to him despite having a much cleaner exit. He missed the apex, or perhaps he was giving me space, but then he kind of closed the door a bit. I didn't mean to hit him, but it wasn't too egregious, so I think he wasn't too upset about it. He was going to lose the position anyways because of the penalties, so I just went with it, didn't wait for him. While initially disappointed that I got that overtake because of the penalty, I realized that he wasn't going to be that far away, and in this complex section followed by a really long straight, I was pretty sure he was going to be able to stay within my slip and then chase me down, but unfortunately he didn't keep it too clean, and so I was able to lose him entirely through there. It was about here when I realized that Jack was in the Ford GT and Guzzi was in the Porsche, so here we've jumped ahead because it took an entire lap to catch them. Guzzi's going to be able to just hustle through this entire section. Jack's going to have a ton of power. Other Group 3 cars, when following behind the Ford GT, even if I've been in their slip, with the Ford GT having no slip in front of them, the Ford GT would still pull away. But knowing Jack had slip, even if I was in slip, I was afraid that he's going to still be able to pull away, and the McLaren actually did pretty well. It wasn't until I had to shift to 6th gear because it's a slightly shorter 5th gear than the GT has that he started really pulling away, because that thing just keeps accelerating when I have to shift. So knowing that we've got just another straight coming after this, I was pretty certain that Jack was going to be able to catch up to Guzzi. I was really hoping that I'd be able to drive well enough that I could third party their little battle. It was about here I realized that I was definitely going to be in the fray. I was able to close a lot of distance under braking, and I got a good enough exit that I was deep in their slip. Once again, still getting used to the S while in dirty air, but I was confident that the McLaren was going to be able to handle driving really close to these guys, unlike a lot of the Group 3 cars. While ease of use and comfortability when driving a car really doesn't determine if it's going to be an anti-meta car, because certainly sometime in the future we're going to have anti-meta cars that are a pain to drive, but one of the benefits in the McLaren is it's incredibly stable through there. So Guzzi made some mistakes, Jack's being really aggressive, and right here, Jack made a little bit of a mistake, came off the curb, and I bumped him just a little bit coming out of the corner. But luckily he recovered really quickly. I couldn't quite avoid it, so I didn't give him the position back, and I've raced with Jack a lot. I was pretty sure he wasn't going to be too upset with me. Now, coming onto this right-hander, Guzzi missed the apex by quite a lot. I was pretty certain I'd be able to get a late move on him here, but Porsche acceleration. I couldn't even get up close enough for a dive. Guzzi made another mistake, and it still wasn't quite enough for me to dive in. I also didn't want to sacrifice my exit. His exit was sacrificed because of the line he had to take, and he was still able to keep a lot of momentum through there and take off just about as fast as I could. So again, the Porsche is really amazing, and not at all to pick on Guzzi. It's just that this Porsche is incredible. We all make mistakes. I love you, Guzzi. I avoided the curb this time because I knew I'd have to steer more to not run into Guzzi, and I was afraid that the dirty air might make it crazy, but the McLaren really showed how much more power it has than the Porsche here. And I did defend going into this corner. I knew Guzzi wouldn't do anything crazy. I just didn't want to give him the position for free. And because of that, that was actually the last bit of action for the race. I hadn't sweated time trial yet, but take a look at the lap times. Mid 47s for the non-meta car before actually putting a lot of practice into this felt pretty good to me. And that's actually when I really decided that I was going to use the McLaren to be my anti-meta car of the week. Who knows if it'll be the anti-meta meta car though. Thank you so much for watching. You can expect a different anti-meta guide every single week. I'm a Twitch partner and a full-time streamer, and recently I've taken one of my streaming days every week to start producing YouTube content, so you can expect a lot more from me. Please like, subscribe, share it with all of your friends, and there's going to be a lot more coming.